I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals. We are talking about Alberto, a subtropical storm that's been in the eastern Gulf of Mexico throughout the day. Now, during the day this morning especially, strong thunderstorms and still the threat of tornadoes across central Florida. Now, that's a feeder band that goes into the storm. And note the radar can't see the other half of the storm. There is rain out here, but it's just too far from the radars onshore. Alberto is a lopsided system. That's part of the reason why it's subtropical. The maximum sustained wind, 50 miles an hour, and those winds extend out dozens of miles in the Gulf of Mexico. It is steadily moving north-northwest at 12. At this point, it's basically due south of Apalachicola late evening on Sunday, May 27th, and the forecast track is going to take it north-northwest through the night. Now, notice the difference in potential landfall. If it goes more on a north track toward Apalachicola, it could make landfall well before sunrise on Monday. If it goes farther northwestward toward Pensacola, landfall would be later in the day, maybe even Monday evening. And projections right now are that it should maintain that same wind speed. Now, it may fluctuate a little bit, but it's not likely that it's going to intensify into a big storm, in part because it is lopsided. It is not a perfectly circular storm, and at the rate it's moving, it doesn't have a lot of time to strengthen. In the Florida Panhandle, that's the location where you've got to watch out for the greatest impact. Right now, that could be flash flooding from heavy rainfall followed by storm surge, just from the fact that the storm is going to be pushing water up against the coast. The threat of tornadoes in North Florida is really more toward northeastern Florida and north central Florida rather than the western Panhandle. And extreme wind right now doesn't look like that. But here is just one computer model. This model goes until 9 a.m. on Monday, shows a bunch of different things here. First of all, it shows the center of the storm still offshore. But remember, you can pick that storm up, shift it over to the east, you can shift it to the west or a little farther north or south. Not totally certain, even this close to landfall. You just don't know until it gets really close. But notice that north wind for the Mississippi coast and southern Alabama. That actually will push water out of the bays and out of some of the rivers. So while in the Panhandle you will have rising water from surge, away from that you may actually have lowering tide levels. Now, by mid-afternoon, rain will pick up throughout the area, not necessarily heavy rain, but what's really clear in the bright orange and red is where the heaviest rain is projected, right in the middle of the Florida Panhandle. So that could be the part of the eye wall where you tend to get the heaviest wind around any tropical system as it moves close to the coastline. And this particular model takes it onshore, the center of it, really between Pensacola Bay and Choctawhatchee Bay. The strongest wind impact, the heaviest rain impact is typically to the right of the path, but notice this model also wraps the rain around it. So this is why if you're in Baldwin County, for example, you may still see substantial rain, even though the heaviest rain should stay mainly to the east. And just as a rough projection, notice Choctawhatchee Bay, 4 to 8 inches of rain, the rest of the Panhandle, 2 to 4 to 5 to 6 inches, and then once you get it to Baldwin and Mobile counties, it's just likely going to be a couple inches of rain. Those numbers will change, they will vary. Our ground is saturated, so it's easy to get quick flooding. That's why a flash flood watch continues for southern Alabama, the Florida Panhandle. Also, a tropical storm warning continues for coastal Mobile and Baldwin counties, and as well as all of the Panhandle and Escambia County, Alabama. That is for the winds that could gust to over 40 miles an hour. That's tropical storm force. So now, based on the models that I showed you in the wind direction, with wind pushing up against the coast, Pensacola Bay, East Bay, Choctawhatchee Bay along the coast, that's where you could see 2 to 4 feet of water pushed up and stand, in other words, storm surge flooding, potentially there. Now, in terms of our tides, our low tide tonight, Sunday night, 10 o'clock, high tide is Monday morning just before noon, so the worst scenario would be if it comes in quickly toward noontime, you'll have an additional amount of water level, so 2 to 4 feet, again, is the range of possibility. Low tide for tomorrow, Monday, is going to be in the evening. Now, here's some current winds as of Sunday evening. Onshore, 7 miles an hour in Panama City, 12 in Pensacola, 10 in Apalachicola. Not that bad, but look at the buoys out in the Gulf, not too far southwest of Apalachicola. 47-mile-an-hour wind. That is the steady wind. South of Mobile Bay, wind about 25 miles an hour. Notice the direction. So the storm is south of Apalachicola. You have a counterclockwise circulation. That's the current wind. Now let's talk about the wind forecast. And this is a computer model starting at midnight. And it shows wind still about 10 to 15 miles an hour, picking up a little more in Destin. That's the steady wind, but it can gust easily to, say, an additional 50%. So Destin, you could have winds gusting to 30 miles an hour tonight. Through the night, the models still keep that same offshore wind for most locations, again, with the storm being out in the Gulf of Mexico. That's 6 a.m. on Monday. By Monday noontime, look what starts to happen with the wind. Still an offshore wind from Mobile to Pensacola, but Panama City and Apalachicola have an onshore wind. And if you just kind of connect that wind circle, the wind arrows, it tells you that the center of the storm likely still to be offshore, with wind blowing up into the bays around Panama City and off out of the bays for Pensacola Bay and Mobile Bay. Projection, noon tomorrow. Move forward in time to tomorrow at about 3 o'clock. And here's the one you need to focus on. This one potentially could be the landfall period. A north wind to the west, a south wind to the east. This says the center of the storm would be right about there on the coastline. Winds being pushed up into Choctawhatchee Bay, being pushed out of Pensacola Bay, but please remember you can shift this 30 miles in either direction, so it's not exactly what could happen, but it's a rough idea of what could happen. Destin, Panama City, along the coastline, those wind projections are pretty much for down here where we walk around. If you're on a high-rise condo right at the coast, you can add more to that wind because there's less friction up there in the sky. And when you want to talk about wind gusts, 27, 29, that's basically 30, add about 50%. So in Pensacola, your winds could be gusting 45 to 50 miles an hour. Same thing in Destin. These are just rough estimates. Once that system goes inland, notice the wind shifting already at Mobile, a northwest wind by Monday evening at 6 o'clock. Still an onshore wind from places like Choctawhatchee Bay eastward toward Panama City. And then as it moves farther to the north, Monday evening, the winds gradually begin to subside. So those wind directions and the speeds are going to depend upon exactly where it makes landfall. Today was interesting. I don't know if you noticed, cirrus clouds were coming in from the south. Cumulus clouds were heading into the Gulf. That tells you that there's low pressure out in the Gulf of Mexico. And while it was mostly quiet for Mobile and Baldwin counties, by late afternoon into the evening, we started to see some showers associated with Alberto. Now again, those wide outer bands, and even as the sun about to set, every once in a while you'll get the shower. And just like any tropical system, when the rain falls down, it brings down that faster spinning air, the higher momentum. And that's the same thing that we'll deal with tomorrow. Wherever it rains, you're going to really see the winds pick up. If you're in between rain bands, it may not be that significant of an event for you. So this subtropical issue, Alberto is a subtropical storm. I think you know what a tropical storm is, and you probably know what a regular storm is, like a winter storm. Well, a winter storm has a cold front, a warm front, and it's not just windy right in the middle, it's windy all throughout the storm system, like a nor'easter. A tropical storm has no fronts. It's typically a circular system, and the highest wind is right around the center, right around the core of the storm. Well, Alberto is right in the middle. It is a subtropical storm, and that simply means it's a hybrid of a tropical storm and a regular storm. So not unusual, it's just sort of a new designation. It doesn't really change the impact when it comes ashore, which is storm surge, wind, possible tornadoes. And as far as Alberto goes, the threat of tornadoes is going to be mainly east of the center. So I'll leave you with this last model. Midday Monday, scattered thunderstorms. You see that rain band quickly going on shore with a circular motion, a center of an eye, 9 o'clock Monday evening. One projection of where the system could be east of the Perdido River, moving out of the Florida Panhandle into Escambia County along I-65 into central Alabama. The tornado threat would be far east. It would be more east than what you see right there. But we do have to watch for these patterns that look like feeder bands, because even as the storm goes northward, if those feeder bands linger on Tuesday, they will be bringing in more rain in little skinny corridors, and that's the additional rain that could lead to additional flooding. Also, even on Tuesday, once it goes north, those feeder bands potentially can also bring in small tornadoes. So things to watch out for even once it's gone. So that's your latest outlook. Here's your latest extended outlook for the way things are going to play out. Remember, there's a huge difference between if you're in the Pensacola area versus the Mobile area. Relatively quiet in Mobile on Monday. Potentially stormy in Pensacola on Monday. Destin, potential direct strike from a subtropical storm, followed by lingering rain tapering Tuesday, and then a quieter week. Stay safe. I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Seals.